The candlelight danced across our dining table as I adjusted the white roses for the third time. The smell of homemade pasta filled our small apartment, mixing with the sound of rain tapping against our windows. 2 years of marriage, and I still felt butterflies when I heard David's key in the lock. Tonight was special. Tonight, I had news that would change everything. I smoothed my blue dress and checked the mirror one more time. The pregnancy test was hidden in my purse, wrapped in tissue paper like a precious gift. We'd been trying for a baby for 6 months. And finally, those 2 pink lines had appeared this morning. I'd practiced the words a dozen times. David, we're going to be parents. The door opened, and David walked in, shaking raindrops from his dark hair. His smile reached his eyes when he saw the table set you. Lisa, this looks incredible, he said, kissing my cheek. What's the special occasion? Our anniversary dinner, I said, my heart racing. 2 years of being Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. He pulled me close, and I breathed in his familiar cologne. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreaming of. But then, over his shoulder, I saw a figure in the hallway. Patricia. My mother-in-law stood in our doorway without knocking, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. Her silver hair was perfect as always, not a strand out of place despite the rain. Her cold blue eyes scanned our romantic setup with obvious disapproval. Patricia, I said, forcing a smile. We weren't expecting you. I need to speak with my son, she said, completely ignoring my greeting. It's urgent. David stepped back from me, confusion crossing his face. Mom? What's wrong? Is everything okay? Patricia glanced at me, then back at David. Privately, my stomach dropped. In 2 years of marriage, Patricia had never approved of me. I was too young, too independent, too different from the socialite wives of David's friends. But tonight felt different. Something was calculating in her eyes. Mom, whatever it is, you can say it in front of Lisa, David said, taking my hand. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. David, darling, I really think we should discuss this alone. The way she said darling made my skin crawl. It was sweet poison. The kind of tone that had been slowly turning my husband against me for months. David looked between us, torn. 5 minutes, he said to me apologetically. Let me just see what's wrong. They moved to the corner of our small living room, but I could see them from the kitchen. Patricia leaned close to David, showing him something on her phone screen. Her voice was a whisper, but her gestures were dramatic. She pointed at the screen, then toward me, her face twisted with fake concern. I watched David's expression change. His relaxed smile faded first, replaced by confusion. Then a darker express. His jaw tightened. His shoulders went rigid. Whatever Patricia was showing him, whatever poison she was whispering, it was having. Is it true? He asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the apartment. I turned from the stove, pasta spoon still in my hand. Is what true? Patricia stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder like she was comforting him. But her eyes met mine with satisfaction. She'd won something, and I didn't even know we were playing a game. What she's saying about you and Jake, David said, stepping toward me. Is it true? Jake, my coworker. The married father of 2 who helped me carry supplies to my classroom. The man I'd mentioned exactly twice in casual conversation about work. David, I don't understand. The hotel receipt, Lisa. The photos. The messages. His voice was rising, and I'd never heard him speak to me this way. Were you planning to tell me? Ever? What hotel receipt? What photos? David, I have no idea what you're talking about. But he wasn't listening. His face was red now, the vein in his temple throbbing the way it did when he was really angry. Behind him, Patricia watched like she was enjoying a show. 2 years, he said, his voice shaking. 2 years of marriage, and you've been lying to my face. I haven't lied about anything. I dropped the spoon, reaching for him. David, please, just listen to me. That's when it happened. His hand came out of nowhere, connecting with my cheek so hard that my head snapped to the side. The slap echoed through our apartment, followed by complete silence. I stumbled backward, catching myself against the counter, my hand flying to my burning face. The force knocked my purse off the counter. It hit the floor, contents spilling everywhere. Lipstick, keys, receipts, and there, wrapped in tissue paper but now exposed, was the pregnancy test. The plastic stick rolled across our hardwood floor, coming to rest at David's feet. 2 pink lines. Positive. Pregnant. We all stared at it. David, Patricia, and I, frozen in a horrible triangle around this tiny piece of evidence that changed everything. "Oh my goodness," Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Lisa, is that?" David's face went white. He looked from the test to his hand, the one that had just struck me, the one that had just hit his pregnant wife. "Sarah," he breathed, using the pet name he'd called me since our first date. "Are you?" I touched my stinging cheek, tears filling my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm pregnant. That's what I wanted to tell you tonight. That's why I made your favorite dinner, why I set up the candles. I wanted it to be perfect." The silence in the room was deafening. David stared at me, then at the test, then at his trembling hand. Patricia stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, for once at a loss for words. That's when Mrs. Chen's voice broke through the tension. "Is everything all right in there?" Our elderly neighbor stood in our doorway, concern written across her weathered face. The door had been left open when Patricia arrived, and she'd heard everything. She took in the scene, me holding my red cheek, David standing over a pregnancy test, Patricia looking guilty in the corner. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Lisa, dear," she said firmly, "I think you should come with me." I met David Thompson on a Tuesday afternoon in the university library. I was struggling with a stack of heavy textbooks for my education degree when they tumbled out of my arms, papers scattering across the floor. David appeared like a hero in a romantic movie, gathering my scattered notes and carrying my books to my study table. "You looked like you could use some help," he said with a smile that made my knees weak. He was finishing his business degree, 3 years older than me, with kind brown eyes and a laugh that filled the whole library. We spent that evening talking over coffee, then dinner, then walking around campus until the security guards locked the gates. Our courtship was something out of a fairy tale. David brought me flowers every Friday, remembered my favorite coffee order, and listened to my dreams of becoming a teacher with genuine interest. He was protective but not possessive, supportive but not controlling. When he proposed after a year of dating, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The first red flag should have been our engagement party. Patricia Thompson stood in the corner of the restaurant, surveying the celebration with the eye of a general planning a battle. She wore black to our engagement party, black, and spent the evening making subtle comments about my dress, my family, my career choice. "Teaching is such a noble profession," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though it doesn't pay very well, does it?" David is used to a certain lifestyle. "Mom," David warned, but Patricia just laughed it off. "I'm just saying, marriage requires compromise. Lisa will learn." After the wedding, Patricia's behavior escalated slowly, like a pot being brought to a boil. First, she started dropping by unannounced. "I was just in the neighborhood," she'd say, letting herself in with the spare key David had given her for emergencies. She'd walk through our apartment with a critical eye, rearranging my kitchen cabinets and moving my decorations. "Oh, honey," she'd say, "this would look so much better over here. Trust me, I've been decorating homes since before you were born." When I tried to talk to David about it, he'd shrug it off. "She's just trying to help, Lisa. She means well." But her help felt like an invasion. She'd come over while I was at work and clean our apartment, but somehow it never felt clean. It felt violated. My personal items would be moved, my routines disrupted. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes. "Noticed you were out of milk. Picked some up. A good wife always keeps the refrigerator stocked." The comments about my teaching job got more frequent and more cutting. "David works such long hours at the firm," she'd say. "He needs a wife who can focus on taking care of him, not someone tired from dealing with other people's children all day." Slowly, David began to echo her concerns. "Maybe you could cut back on the after-school tutoring," he suggested one evening. "You seem stressed lately. Maybe you don't need to spend so much on supplies for your classroom. We should be saving money. Maybe you could cook dinner more often instead of ordering takeout when you're tired." Each maybe was Patricia's voice coming out of my husband's mouth. The isolation started gradually. Patricia would plan family events during my work commitments, then act hurt when I couldn't attend. "David's career is just more demanding right now," she'd tell relatives. Lisa doesn't quite understand the pressures he's under. She began inviting David to lunch without me, taking him shopping for clothes she preferred, scheduling his time like she was his personal assistant. When I complained, David got defensive. She's my mother, Lisa. She's been lonely since the divorce. Can't you just be patient with her? But patience became my prison. Every time I stood up for myself, I became the unreasonable one. Every time I set a boundary, I was being selfish. Patricia had a gift for making herself the victim while positioning me as the aggressor. The turning point came 6 months before our anniversary. Patricia started asking questions about my coworkers, particularly the men. She'd drop by the school sometimes, observing from her car, taking note of who I talked to, who walked me to my car. Jake Martinez was a 4th-grade teacher, happily married with twin daughters. He was friendly and professional, nothing more. We'd collaborated on a few school projects, shared coffee in the teacher's lounge, and helped each other carry supplies. Normal coworker interactions. But Patricia saw opportunity in Jake. She started mentioning him to David. Lisa talks about this Jake fellow quite a bit, she'd say. They seem to spend a lot of time together at work. At first, David brushed it off. But Patricia was persistent, like water wearing away stone. I drove by the school today, she'd report. Saw Lisa getting into a car with that man. I'm sure it was innocent, but the but did all the work. Then came the fabricated evidence. Patricia was more tech-savvy than she let on. She created fake social media accounts, edited photos to make innocent interactions look intimate, and even created fake text message threads. The hotel receipt was the masterpiece, a real receipt she'd obtained somehow, with my name added through careful photo editing. She built her case methodically, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Each piece of evidence was small enough to be believable, damning enough to plant doubt. The night of our anniversary, Patricia made her move. She called David just as he was leaving work, claiming she had evidence she couldn't ignore anymore. I found these on Lisa's computer, she lied smoothly. I was only trying to help set up that photo album you wanted to make for your anniversary. But David, darling, I think you need to see what I found. She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, crafting lies so detailed that even I might have believed them if I hadn't been living my own life. She showed him the doctored photos, me and Jake appearing to hold hands, sharing what looked like an intimate lunch, entering and leaving what appeared to be a hotel. She had fake text messages, showing Jake and me planning secret meetings. She had that hotel receipt with my name, and the date of a day when I'd actually been homesick with flu, something she'd known because David had mentioned it. I'm so sorry to have to show you this, she'd said, playing the reluctant messenger. But you're my son. You deserve to know the truth. By the time David walked through our door that night, Patricia had him convinced that his wife of 2 years was having an affair. She turned my husband into a weapon and aimed him directly at me, and I'd been completely blind to it all, preparing a romantic dinner to share the news that we were going to be parents. Mrs. Chen's spare bedroom became my sanctuary. The elderly widow had been our neighbor for the entire 2 years of our marriage, always greeting us with warm smiles and the occasional plate of homemade dumplings. Now she sat beside my bed, holding a warm cup of ginger tea while I cried. He hit me, I whispered for the 100th time. He actually hit me. I know, dear, Mrs. Chen said softly. I heard everything through the walls. That woman's voice carries. My phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. David's name flashed across the screen with each call and text. The messages ranged from desperate apologies to angry demands that I come home. Lisa, please, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. The baby. God, the baby. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? My mother showed me things. But maybe I should have listened to you first. Then, hours later, his tone would shift. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about this like adults. My mother says you're being dramatic. That pregnancy hormones make women emotional. Patricia's messages were worse. She'd somehow gotten my number and felt entitled to her opinion. Lisa, this is exactly the kind of behavior that destroys marriages. Good wives work through problems. They don't run away. You're carrying my grandchild. That gives me rights too. David is devastated. Look what you've done to this family. I blocked her number after the third message. Mrs. Chen helped me make my first prenatal appointment. At 28 years old, sitting alone in that waiting room while other couples held hands and talked excitedly about baby names, I felt completely lost. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. I was about 8 weeks pregnant. Everything looked healthy despite the stress and trauma. When she asked about the father, I broke down completely. It's complicated. I managed through tears. Domestic violence? The doctor asked gently. The words hit me like ice water. Domestic violence. Was that what this was? David had never hit me before. He'd never even raised his voice to me until that night, but the red mark on my cheek and the fear in my stomach suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, David was experiencing his own revelation. Without me in the apartment, Patricia's mask began to slip. She moved through our space like she owned it, going through my belongings, making lists of things she thought I should get rid of. Now that she's gone, Patricia said on the second day, we can fix this place up properly. Lisa never did have good taste. David watched his mother reorganize our home and felt something cold settle in his stomach. These weren't the actions of a concerned mother-in-law. This was something else entirely. On the third day, David's curiosity got the better of him. While Patricia was in the shower, he looked at her phone, the same phone she'd used to show him the evidence of my affair. What he found changed everything. Photo editing apps, multiple fake social media accounts, a folder titled Lisa Evidence containing dozens of manipulated images and fabricated screenshots. The hotel receipt that had seemed so damning was right there in her photo gallery, along with the original, a receipt for Patricia's own hotel stay from last month, carefully altered to include my name. David's hands shook as he scrolled through months of calculated deception. Patricia hadn't stumbled upon evidence of my affair. She'd created it, piece by piece, with the patience of someone planning a long-term campaign. The fake text messages were there too, created using online tools that could mimic real phone interfaces. Conversations between Jake and me that had never happened, talking about secret meetings and stolen kisses. Patricia had researched Jake's schedule, his car, even his favorite restaurants to make the lies more believable. But the worst discovery was a voice recording Patricia had made of herself, practicing her lies. Her voice was clear and confident as she rehearsed the script she'd used on David. I'm so sorry to have to show you this, darling, but you're my son and you deserve to know the truth. I found these on Lisa's computer while setting up that photo album. I wish I didn't have to be the one to tell you this. David played the recording 3 times before the full impact hit him. His mother hadn't just lied to him, she'd manipulated him into becoming abusive. She'd turned him into the kind of man he'd always sworn he'd never be. He confronted Jake first, driving to the elementary school during lunch break. Jake was eating a sandwich in his classroom, grading papers with photos of his twin daughters taped to his desk. I need to ask you something, David said, his voice hollow. About Lisa. Jake looked confused. Lisa Thompson? She's a great teacher. Is everything okay? She hasn't been at work this week. Did you? Have you ever? David couldn't even form the words. Have I ever what? Jake stood up, concern crossing his face. David, what's going on? Lisa's pregnant, right? I heard some of the other teachers talking. Is she okay? The genuine confusion and worry in Jake's voice told David everything he needed to know. This man had never been anything more than a colleague to me. There was no affair, no secret meetings, no betrayal. David drove home in a daze, the weight of what he'd done crushing down on him. That evening, he confronted his mother. Patricia was in our kitchen, cooking dinner as if she lived there. She'd thrown away my favorite coffee mug and replaced it with one she preferred. She'd reorganized my spice rack according to her system. She was erasing me from my own home. We need to talk, David said, holding up her phone. Patricia's face went white when she saw the device in his hands. David, you had no right to go through my private... Private? David's voice cracked. You call fabricating evidence against my wife private? For a moment, Patricia tried to maintain her innocence. I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything, Mom. The photo editing apps, the fake social media accounts, the original hotel receipt with your name on it, not Lisa's. David set the phone on the counter between them. You made it all up. Patricia's composure finally cracked. Her perfect facade crumbled, revealing something ugly underneath. She wasn't right for you, Patricia screamed. "I could see it from the beginning. She's beneath you, David, beneath our family. I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" David stepped back, seeing his mother clearly for the first time. "You turned me into someone who hits pregnant women. You call that protection?" You needed to see who she really was. Who she really was. She was faithful. She was loving. She was carrying your grandchild and planning to surprise me with the news. David's voice broke. "And I hit her because of your lies." Patricia tried a different approach, reaching for him with tears in her eyes. "Darling, you have to understand. I only wanted what was best for you. Lisa was changing you, making you soft. Get out." The words were quiet but absolute. "David, get out of my house. Get out of my marriage. Get out of my life." David moved to the door, holding it open. "If you're not gone in 1 hour, I'm calling the police." Patricia gathered her things in shocked silence, perhaps finally realizing she'd pushed too far. As she reached the door, she made one last attempt. "You'll regret this," she said. "When she leaves you, when she takes that baby away from you, you'll remember that I tried to warn you." David looked at his mother with disgust. "The only thing I regret is believing you." After Patricia left, David sat in our empty apartment, staring at the pregnancy test that still lay on the floor where it had fallen. He picked it up carefully, holding this tiny symbol of the life we'd created together, the life he'd endangered with his violence. That's when he started recording himself, speaking directly to his phone's camera. "Lisa, if you ever see this, I need you to know the truth about what happened. My mother lied about everything." The park where David proposed was almost empty on that gray Thursday morning. I sat on our old bench, watching him approach across the grass. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. In his hands, he carried a tablet and a folder thick with papers. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting carefully on the far end of the bench. "I wasn't sure you would." I kept my hand on my stomach, a protective gesture that had become automatic. "Mrs. Chen said you had proof of something, evidence that would change everything." David nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "Lisa, what I'm about to show you, it's going to hurt, but you need to see it." He opened the tablet and showed me everything. The photo editing apps on Patricia's phone, the fake social media accounts she'd created, the original hotel receipt with her name on it, alongside the doctored version she'd shown him. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of calculated lies. Seeing the fabricated text messages between Jake and me was surreal. Entire conversations I'd never had, personality traits that weren't mine, a version of myself I didn't recognize. "She made it all up," David whispered. "Every single piece of evidence, every doubt she planted in my mind. I believed her lies over your truth, and I hate myself for it." The recording of Patricia practicing her script was the final blow. Hearing her rehearse the lies she'd told David, perfecting her tone of fake concern, made me feel sick. "She planned this for months," I said, staring at the screen. "While I was making her coffee and trying to win her approval, she was building a case to destroy our marriage." David pulled out his phone next, showing me the video he'd recorded. "I confronted her after I found everything. She confessed to it all." In the shaky video, Patricia's mask had completely fallen away. Gone was the concerned mother-in-law. In her place was someone calculating and cruel. "She wasn't right for you," Patricia screamed in the recording. "She was beneath you, David. I was protecting you from making the biggest mistake of your life." I watched David in the video, standing up to his mother for the first time in his life. "You turned me into someone who hits pregnant women," he said. "You call that protection?" Seeing the confrontation gave me some satisfaction, but it couldn't erase what had happened. David had still chosen to believe the worst about me. He'd still raised his hand to me while I was carrying his child. "I know you might not be able to forgive me," David said, closing the tablet. "I know I broke something between us that might never heal. But Lisa, I need you to know I will spend the rest of my life making this right." He opened the folder next, showing me papers from a law office. "I've filed for a restraining order against my mother," he said. "She's not allowed within 500 feet of you, me, or the baby. I've also had papers drawn up." He swallowed hard. "If I ever raise my hand to you again, for any reason, You get full custody of our child automatically. No questions asked. I stared at the legal documents. David was signing away his parental rights if he ever became violent again. It was a promise with teeth, backed by law. I've also started therapy, he continued, pulling out another business card. Dr. Rebecca Martinez specializes in manipulation recovery and domestic violence prevention. I've had 3 sessions already. Manipulation recovery? I asked. David nodded. Dr. Martinez says what my mother did has a name: covert narcissistic abuse. She spent years grooming me to distrust you, to prioritize her feelings over yours. She made me her weapon against you. The clinical terms helped somehow. Knowing there were names for Patricia's behavior, that therapists specialized in treating the damage she'd caused, made it feel less personal and more like something that could be healed. What else? I asked, because I could tell there was more. I want to start couples counseling, David said. But only if you're willing. Only if you think there's something left to save. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. The man who'd brought me flowers every Friday when we were dating. The man who'd carried my textbooks in the library. The man who'd also hit me while I was pregnant with his child. I have conditions, I said finally. Anything. Individual therapy for you continues, no matter what. Couples counseling with someone who specializes in domestic violence. Complete no contact with your mother. No exceptions, no holidays, no emergencies. And David. I paused, making sure he was listening. One more incident, even raised voices, and I'm done forever. You get one chance to prove you've changed. Yes, he said immediately. Yes to all of it. But Patricia wasn't going to disappear quietly. The harassment started within days. She left flowers at my classroom with notes attached. For my grandchild, blood is thicker than water. She called the school pretending to be me, trying to get information about my schedule. She even showed up at Mrs. Chen's house, demanding to know when I was coming home. Mrs. Chen, bless her, met Patricia at the door with a rolling pin and some choice words in Mandarin. That woman is poison, Mrs. Chen told me later. In my village, we had a saying: a mother-in-law who destroys her son's marriage will die alone and bitter. Patricia is well on her way. The legal system moved slowly. The restraining order was filed, but Patricia seemed to view it as a suggestion rather than a court order. She violated it repeatedly, showing up at places she knew I'd be, sending gifts through mutual friends, creating new social media accounts to contact me. Each violation was documented, each piece of evidence added to our case. David handled all of it, shielding me from as much of Patricia's behavior as possible. You don't have to see her messages, he said, taking screenshots for our lawyer. You don't have to know what she's saying. That's my job, now protecting you from her. The pregnancy progressed despite the stress. At 16 weeks, we learned we were having a son. David cried during that ultrasound, his hand in mine as we watched our baby move on the screen. He's beautiful, David whispered. He's going to know only love. Only safety. Dr. Martinez helped us navigate the complicated emotions of rebuilding trust while expecting a child. She explained how trauma bonds work, why I still felt conflicted about David despite everything that had happened. Love and abuse can exist in the same relationship, she said during one of our joint sessions. That's what makes domestic violence so confusing for victims. David, your job now is to prove through consistent actions that the abuse was an aberration, not a pattern. The work was hard. There were days when I looked at David and remembered the sound of his hand hitting my face. There were nights when I woke up in a panic, convinced I was still in danger. But there were also moments of progress. David attending every prenatal appointment. David researching car seats and reading pregnancy books. David standing between me and Patricia when she showed up at the grocery store, calling security instead of letting her approach us. She used to control me through guilt, David explained to me after that incident, making me feel responsible for her emotions. But I see it now. Her feelings aren't my responsibility. Your safety is. The turning point came at 20 weeks, when Patricia escalated again. She'd discovered which hospital I was registered at for delivery, and had somehow convinced a nurse that she was my mother, trying to get information about my due date and room assignment preferences. The hospital called to verify, and when they realized Patricia was lying, they banned her from the premises and filed a police report. She's not going to stop, I told David that night as we painted the nursery. Your mother will never accept that she lost. David set down his paintbrush and took my hands. Then we'll keep stopping her, he said. Every time for as long as it takes. She doesn't get to terrorize you. She doesn't get to control our family. Looking around the nursery painted soft yellow with books and toys we'd chosen together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. We still had a long way to go. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, and the legal battle with Patricia was far from over. But for the first time since that horrible night, I could imagine a future where our family was safe, where our son would grow up protected from the kind of manipulation that had nearly destroyed us. David had chosen me over his mother. It was late, and it had come at a terrible cost, but he'd chosen me. Labor started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks before my due date. The contractions woke me from a deep sleep, and for a moment, I panicked not about the pain, but about Patricia. Would she somehow know? Would she try to interfere even now? David was immediately alert, helping me time contractions and gathering our hospital bag. We'd practiced this routine a dozen times, but he still double-checked everything. Phone chargers, insurance cards, the special security code word we'd arranged with the hospital. Mrs. Chen? David asked, and I nodded. Our elderly neighbor had volunteered to be our backup support person and Patricia deterrent. The hospital staff was already prepared for us. Our caseworker had flagged our file, and security knew Patricia's photo. A coded bracelet on my wrist would alert all staff that I was under protection protocols. No one gets information about Lisa Thompson without the security code, the charge nurse confirmed with David. No exceptions. 12 hours later, Thomas David Thompson entered the world screaming his tiny lungs out. David sobbed as the doctor placed our son on my chest, 8 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect, healthy baby. He's so beautiful, David whispered, touching Thomas's tiny fist. Lisa, look what we made. In that moment, holding our son while David held us both, the trauma of the past months felt distant. This was what mattered, this new life we'd created and protected together. The first test came sooner than expected. 3 hours after Thomas was born, while I was nursing him for the first time, David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm in the parking lot. I know she had the baby. I have rights as a grandmother. David showed me the message, his jaw set with determination. I'm calling security, he said. She doesn't get to ruin this day. Through our hospital room window, we watched as 2 security guards escorted Patricia away from the building. She was shouting, gesturing wildly, playing the victim for anyone who would listen. But this time, her performance fell on deaf ears. The restraining order violation will be added to her file, the security supervisor told us later. She's now banned from hospital property permanently. The next few days in the hospital were peaceful. David stayed in the room with us, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair and taking on every diaper change. He was gentle and attentive, nothing like the angry man who had struck me 6 months earlier. You're a natural, I told him, watching him swaddle Thomas with practiced ease. I read 12 books, he admitted sheepishly, watched about 50 YouTube videos. I wanted to be ready. Mrs. Chen visited with homemade soup and practical gifts, burp cloths, baby blankets, and a beautiful mobile for the nursery. She cooed over Thomas in Mandarin, and he seemed to recognize her voice from all those evenings she'd helped care for me. He looks like his father, Mrs. Chen said, studying Thomas's sleeping face. But he has his mother's stubborn chin. This one will not be easily manipulated. When it was time to go home, David had arranged for additional security. Mrs. Chen's son, a police officer, followed our car to make sure Patricia wasn't waiting at the house. Our new home we'd moved out of the apartment, too full of bad memories, was equipped with security cameras and motion-activated lights. Welcome home, Thomas, I whispered, carrying him into the nursery we'd finished together. The first few weeks of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. David took extended paternity leave, proving his commitment to being present for every moment. We developed routines that had nothing to do with Patricia's expectations, feeding schedules that worked for us, sleeping arrangements that made sense for our family. Patricia's attempts at contact continued, but became increasingly desperate and obvious. She sent packages addressed to baby Thompson that were intercepted by our lawyer. She created fake social media accounts to try to see photos of Thomas, But we'd anticipated this and shared pictures only with a carefully vetted group of friends and family. The legal resolution came when Thomas was 2 months old. Patricia had violated the restraining order 7 times, and the district attorney decided to prosecute. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory psychiatric evaluation. The judge called her behavior calculated harassment designed to intimidate and control, our lawyer explained. She's also required to pay restitution for our legal fees and can have no contact with any of you for 5 years minimum. David's reaction surprised me. Instead of relief, he looked sad. I know she's toxic, he said that night as we watched Thomas sleep in his crib. But she's still my mother. Part of me hoped she'd get help and change. Some people don't want to change, I said gently, taking his hand. They want everyone else to change for them. Dr. Martinez helped us process the complex emotions around Patricia's sentencing. It's normal to grieve the mother you thought you had, she told David, but you're protecting your son from experiencing what you went through. That's breaking the cycle. The real test of our healing came when Thomas was 4 months old. David's phone rang while we were having breakfast, and Patricia's name appeared on the screen. She was calling from jail. I watched David's face carefully, looking for any sign that his mother's manipulation might still work. But David simply declined the call and blocked the number. Thomas deserves better than that kind of grandmother, he said simply. We all do. That evening, I found David going through old photo albums, removing pictures of Patricia and replacing them with new ones of our family. Thomas reaching for his first toy, me nursing him in the rocking chair. The 3 of us together in the hospital. New memories, David explained. Better ones. Mrs. Chen became Thomas's chosen grandmother, teaching him Mandarin nursery rhymes and spoiling him with homemade toys. She'd come over for Sunday dinners, sharing stories about her own family and marveling at Thomas's growth. In my culture, we say children are gifts from ancestors, she told us one evening. Thomas is your fresh start. He carries the best of both of you, but none of the poison from before. As Thomas grew sitting up, babbling, taking his first wobbly steps, I watched David transform completely. The man who had once prioritized his mother's feelings over mine now put our son's needs first in every decision. When Thomas was 10 months old, David got a promotion offer that would require frequent travel. The old David might have taken it to please Patricia, who always pushed him to prioritize career over family. But this David turned it down without hesitation. I don't want to miss anything, he told me. First words, first steps, first day of school. I want to be here for all of it. The anniversary of that terrible night came and went without drama. We were too busy with Thomas's first birthday party to dwell on the past. Our house was full of friends, real friends who had supported us through everything, and the sound of laughter filled every room. As I watched David help Thomas blow out his single birthday candle, I realized something important. We weren't the same people who had lived in that apartment, who had let Patricia divide us. We were stronger, wiser, more committed to protecting what we'd built together. Make a wish for Thomas, I told David, as our son grabbed handfuls of birthday cake. David closed his eyes for a moment, then smiled at me. I wished for him to always feel safe and loved, to never doubt that his parents put him first. Later that night, after Thomas was asleep and our house was clean, David and I sat on our back porch watching the stars. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this peaceful life. The trauma had felt insurmountable, the trust impossible to rebuild. Do you ever regret giving me another chance? David asked quietly. I considered the question seriously. There had been moments of doubt, nights when I'd wondered if I was being naive or foolish. But looking at our life now, Thomas safe in his crib, David committed to our family, Patricia permanently out of our lives, I knew I'd made the right choice. No, I said honestly, but only because you did the work. You chose to change, chose to get help, chose us over her. That made all the difference. David nodded, understanding. I never want to be that man again, the one who let someone else's poison turn me into something horrible. You won't be, I said with certainty, because now you know what manipulation looks like. You know what real love looks like too. As we sat there in comfortable silence, Thomas's baby monitor crackling softly between us, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Complete peace. Our home was truly ours now, filled with love that built up instead of tore down. protected instead of controlled. Patricia was serving her sentence, getting the psychiatric help she needed whether she wanted it or not. Dav,